Hello, and welcome to this exciting roundtable on next generation supply chains, leveraging AI in the future of manufacturing. We have a great lineup of illustrious panelists, and if you want to know more about them and what they do, please do visit the speaker bios on the forum panel. So, the manufacturing and manufacturing sectors is incredibly broad, and many manufacturing companies have very little in common. However, there are many challenges today that I think many manufacturing firms would agree are top of mind. First up, I think supply chain risk, whether driven by COVID pandemic or geopolitics, affects many global manufacturing firms. Yield is a continual problem, which increases costs and carbon footprints. There are global concerns about workforce retirements and the hiring of new effective workers. And finally, consumers and governments are increasingly concerned as to where products come from for sustainability or ethics reasons, and that's putting pressure on manufacturers. These challenges have led some firms to recognize the need to become more flexible, more automated, and possibly even more decentralized in their manufacturing. Artificial intelligence in all its many forms has the potential to help manufacturers. I am really excited to hear more of what our technology experts and policy experts say on this roundtable as they are leading the charge in scaling the use of AI within a whole range of manufacturing sectors. So first off, I want to hear from a few of you developing AI as to really help our audience understand how AI can be used in manufacturing, where its greatest benefits lie, and what it can do really well to help in manufacturing. And I'm going to open up with AJ, if you could start us off there, and then hopefully anyone else who wants to come in after can do, or I'll pick on you.
Great, Claire. Thank you. Good to be here, and good to be around with a very distinguished speakers. You talked a little bit about 2020. I think everybody in the audience understand the difficulties and challenges of what COVID-19 did. I also want to talk about, if there is a silver lining of COVID-19, is we've noticed that we've recognized that there was major gaps in healthcare, in manufacturing sectors, and supply chain, obviously. But I really believe that it did help the industry in general, and specifically in the manufacturing sector, to basically embrace digital transformation and specifically AI. So I think that's going to be a great catalyst in terms of facing some of the challenges. And I think it's also going to accelerate some of really the positive things, like addressing issues related to climate change, and how we can look at manufacturing and supply chain and how we can basically adapt to that. So I think this is going to be very exciting, and I think stronger embracement of technology, digital transformation, and AI. It's gonna help the industry in general.
Okay, so I mean, are there examples? Maybe Barbara, do you want to jump in and talk from Schneider's point of view about examples where you used AI or seen AI used in manufacturing and where you think it has most promise?
Yes, I can share quite some examples. So in our global supply chain, which is overseeing our all our manufacturing sites, and also is responsible for the supply chain, we started to work on different levels. And to be very honest, it was sometimes also trial error. So we created a team and we started to work together with consultants and the companies. And one thing that we did was supplier resilience. So in principle, identifying the risks. Might the supplier run into a risk that we were not really aware of, the risk of not having the right components available, and so on. So, and also simulate what would be the business impact in our factory if a supplier would not be here anymore. And then another part where we did a lot was on product quality, just the yield that you mentioned, Kathy, in the beginning. We really applied it in a factory in China between an IoT, artificial intelligence project, where in principle what we did, we were adopting the auto-regulation of the thermal adjustment process of our mini circuit breaker. And this was based on a lot of, let's say, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And with this, we were able to increase the yield from 90 to 97%. And there are many, many other things we are trying. And there were also failures, as I said. Sometimes, and I think that the cause of failure usually was we were putting too much hope in what could happen, and then it didn't really happen, or the quality of the data wasn't right, and it was already mentioned before, data quality is key, or there was simply not enough data. That's also sometimes an obstacle. So that's in a short, one concrete example.
Great. So prediction, certainly, and simulation. I know a few of you are running companies using computer vision as well. So that's another interesting use case here. Andrew, did you want to say something?
Sure, thanks, Claire. So I've been seeing rapid adoption of AI in different parts of manufacturing, especially visual inspection, where AI solutions are allowing manufacturers to offer more flexible and accurate defect inspection than traditional solutions. But more broadly, I feel like manufacturing as an industry feels relatively AI ready. I used to lead large AI teams in companies like Baidu and Google and help those organizations with AI adoption. And I think they were ready because they had a lot of data. Manufacturing is getting to be relatively AI ready, and so it feels like it's poised for that transformation. But even though we read in the analyst reports, supposedly AI would create how many trillions of dollars in manufacturing and other industries, candidly, almost all of that value has not yet been realized. And we see lots of small scale proof of concepts, but there are systematic problems that we collectively still need to get through in order to realize that huge amounts of value. I think, for example, a lot of companies are struggling with the cost of customization. I think that we as a society, we've figured out how to build a 200-person engineering team to go build an ad system that generates over $1 billion in revenue. But in manufacturing, there's a long tail problem where I see tons of $1 to $5 million projects. That's difficult to get the economics of that to work because of the cost of customization. So I feel like I'm excited by innovations in visual inspection, supply chain, many aspects of manufacturing that can find ways for us to get a lot of these tens of thousands of $1 to $5 billion projects done, which would create tremendous value for manufacturing.
Yeah, definitely. I think many of you would agree. I see you nodding about this idea of AI being a lot of them small consulting projects rather than scaling. Shai, did you want to jump in here? I see your hand up.
Yes, thanks. I think that we've used during the Corona, we were extremely we were working on the silver line that AJ was talking about, and what we've seen is a complete integration from the mining, from where the droids are picking up the rough stones, the diamonds, to the analytical phasing and plotting, where we borrow a lot of the technologies from the health industry and the MRI industry, all the way to pricing engine and grading. And not only have we used AI in an environment which has previously been with a cloud of secrecy, not only are we putting the data out there, but it really helps, and maybe that's the point of Andrew, is to bring in this young talent, and all of our groups are 20-something years old, which are just which love to see how they can use these data and how they can build applications for it. So it's a bit of the chicken and the egg. We were certainly good to go with the advancement, and that in turn has made us a more likable place to work for the young off school.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear that that's happening in the mining sector. I think sometimes we can see manufacturing as being one of the more old-fashioned, or certainly heavy manufacturing being an old-fashioned industry to work in. But yeah, your point, there are lots of young people and there are lots of interesting businesses launching, and finally data hopefully becoming available. Kurt, did you want to step in?
Yeah, and even to build on what Shai was just saying there, I think that the sort of cross-enterprise component where, he was saying from the mine all the way to final production is a really important thing that we're seeing coming out of new initiatives in AI, where if you can actually get visibility into the entire supply chain, that allows you to do optimizations that you just couldn't do before. So instead of locally optimizing for a single asset, you can start to do higher level optimizations. And And I think it's been really exciting to watch, both with, COVID that sort of emphasized the need to optimize the entire supply chain. There's another sort of dimension here as well. I believe AJ was mentioning climate change as well, and the ability to sort of look at how perhaps my products are being used downstream in the supply chain. And maybe I can revise my designs or revise my production to minimize the environmental footprint of products. And so once you get that full view of the supply chain, there's a lot of new opportunities that are coming up. And I do think, especially at COVID, climate change, emphases like this are really shifting from the old way of thinking of information sharing, which was basically, I want to club somebody over the head and not take the blame for quality issues or something else. And instead, now we're starting to see a collaborative view on the supply chain, where if we all share our information together, suddenly we can solve problems that we couldn't solve in the past.
Yeah, and that will be increasingly important, right? This idea of data sharing and being comfortable with sharing data with others in your supply chain. It feels essential if we're going to solve climate change and everything else you talked about. Brad, did you want to start kind of sharing what you had on your mind?
Thanks, Claire. At Uptake, we've been in the center of this conversation in the space for nearly 7 years now. And what I have come to understand quite clearly is the opportunity to reduce the friction of deployment. Referencing Andrew's comment about a much easier to deploy technology that has an objective and clear capacity to create better outcomes. So what we've experienced is a payoff, if you will, in our investment to reduce the friction and increase the ease of deployment, all in service of a concept of industrial intelligence. And the ability to be intelligent, of course, using sensor-derived data, but also using the power of the crowd, if you will. Uptake is now on over 4 million assets. And so all the components of all of those assets create intelligence. And the idea that all operators can benefit when a system like Uptake is widely distributed is becoming easier than ever to understand. And I guess I just say the idea of a precision-oriented manufacturer versus a process-oriented manufacturer is upon us. And the economic benefit that comes out of precision is extraordinary. So finally, I think we're closer than ever to the common understanding that, software delivers precision, not just process. And out of precision comes both ease of deployment and ease of operation, and hopefully also a wider workforce that can fit into the space of traditionally old school, heavy manufacturing and revitalize it.
Actually, can I jump in and just really agree with Brad? I think AI will create precision and quality, but we do have a proof of concept to production gap. So we read about these demos or proof of concepts or small case studies in the news, but even for my teams, after we do a proof of concept, it can be 12 to 18 months to then put it on the manufacturing line. It used to be that, but I think we collectively need to figure out new tooling processes. Sometimes they call ML ops, machine learning operations tools and processes, to quickly, in weeks, rather than like a year and a half, to take these things to production. Thank you, Brad.
And Patrick, I see your hand up there. I just wanted to intro you by saying that I feel like the work you're doing with collaboration and this idea of robots and humans working together with this idea of AI being that lubricating oil speaks quite clearly to some of the stuff that Kurt and Brad were saying about precision and moving into this new realm of manufacturing.
Yeah, one thing I would start with is one of the things that the pandemic reminded us of is the sort of societal reliance we have on manufacturing and supply chains. And that speaks to some of the needs of customers who are making, whether it's vehicles or refrigeration or medical devices or health products. We became acutely aware as a global society of how reliant we are on these things, which tend to run in the background for most people, and we don't think about them. And when we work very directly with manufacturers, and we look at how we can help them. One of the key things that they are looking for, really a key need, is repeatability. Because you stop a line and you've interrupted that production, and I think we saw during the course of the pandemic just how challenging that is for not just the manufacturer, but all the stakeholders downstream. And so that repeatability, building a product that always works, really is very central for us at Vale Robotics. We make a system that allows humans to collaborate closely with industrial robots. These are very large robots. They can weigh 2 tons, move at 5 meters a second. And what we do is we build the hardware and the software that allows them to be responsive to human presence and always be safe, so that as we look at the demographic challenge for production labor, the demographic challenge globally is that the production labor workforce is getting older. And production laborers who are older, who had traditionally been forced to do things like moving heavy objects themselves to fixture them or to place them for assembly, those production workers cannot do that anymore. And if we want to create better ergonomics, better working conditions for them, one of the things we need to do is look at how we can bring together the power of robots with the ingenuity of humans. And that gives you greater flexibility, better productivity, and better ergonomics.
Thank you. Mohammed, I'd love to hear from you and where you sit in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, how you see AI fitting into your manufacturing strategy.
Thank you, Claire. I would like to continue from where Patrick ended up, like the production labor and getting old. From a state of Qatar, a small state of Qatar, where manufacturing activity is not considered one of the top priorities in the country, it will be very difficult to promote it because of different reasons. One of them is labor. So where we can see is that now we define different sectors that we want to target within our manufacturing strategy. And whenever we want to promote these sectors, it will be very difficult. If you talk about availability of resources, if you talk about technology. So the way that we see that how AI can help us in the state of Qatar, it can reduce cost. My colleagues here mentioned a lot of examples how to utilize the data, how to put them in a way that can understand the business itself. We were internally discussing in the ministry the concept of digital twin. Digital twin concept is that you can replicate physical entities, devices, people, processes, and make a model-driven decisions. This helps us really in the ministry promote sectors in a much cheaper way, more cost-effective way. And this can also direct us which facilities or manufacturing sectors that we want to focus on and which one that we don't want to focus. We engage with research and development entities, trying to also utilize, their initiatives. We have QSTP, Qatar Science and Technology Park, where they are promoting advanced technology, 3D printing, research in these areas. The reason that, again, end products from these initiatives will end up in our manufacturing facilities. So in a state like Qatar, a small nation, AI is adding a lot. 3D printing, as another example, also is adding a lot. Because for us, when we did the studies, also it showed us that, okay, and production is smaller units, much cheaper once you have the prototypes ready using 3D printers, more flexible to change and enhance the process itself. So it's really added a lot to a state like Qatar.
Great, thank you. So we've talked a bit about some of the ways we think there is a new era of manufacturing coming along, whether it's through precision, as Brad was saying, and Patrick or Kurt was talking about this idea of more and more data, and Andrew's point that manufacturing finally feels like it's at a place where it can adopt AI well. I'd like to pose the idea to you that we've time traveled to 2030 and the AI has been deployed well in manufacturing. What are the really big in your minds, if you indulge me, what are the big changes in manufacturing you think we'll see in the next decade? For instance, Mohammed's point there about AI being able to help smaller nations, maybe with not, who today haven't focused on manufacturing as a part of the economy, maybe they can do. Maybe the factories will be much smaller, or maybe AI will actually help the mega factories. Will AI shift the where we manufacture things based on cost? Will it change vertical integration possibly? Will things become less vertically integrated or more vertically integrated? What does it look like to some of you think in the next 10 years if AI really does take off for manufacturing? Because without that vision, I think it's going to be hard to get over some of these barriers we have, and without, persuade manufacturers they really need AI. So with that ambitious question, Kurt, I see you nodding. Do you want to have a stab at it?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. It is an interesting topic. In a way, it reminds me of a flashback to, say, the late 1990s, early 2000s with the dot-com revolution. And there was all this debate around, is this technology going to make companies bigger or smaller? As technology breaks down barriers between companies, does that mean we're going to have lots of boutique shops, or are the big companies going to win? Some might argue the big companies won out of that, but nonetheless, it seems like perhaps a similar argument about whether or not AI is just going to make everything so efficient that we need just a few mega huge factories, or is it going to help us sort of break down the challenges of coordinating across the supply chain so we can have, as you were talking about, the more distributed, trying to put manufacturing closer to the end user. I call myself a little bit of a technology optimist. And so from that perspective, I love the vision of a world where we have lots of small manufacturers distributed around the country, minimizing those transportation costs, allowing you to manufacture towards local tastes, all that sort of stuff, where everybody can still run an efficient manufacturing operation, where because they have good data, because they have good AI, they can compete on efficiency at the same level where in the past you would have had to have the giant vertically integrated mega manufacturing sites. So I would say I am biased towards that as the future, though I will admit that perhaps is as much out of my dream for the future as opposed to the underlying economics of the world.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. We can do your dream, and I like some of what you said there. Barbara, I see your physical hand up. Do you want to jump in here as quite a large manufacturing firm?
I can fully support what Kurt is saying. From a sustainability point of view, and also how the world is developing, I would say we are not facing the mega factories of the future, so that we have one production line in one place and it's serving the whole world. Because there is also the resilience, so we want to be closer to the customer. And specifically in Schneider Electric, we are working on a plan to say, okay, Europe for Europe, and we do China for China. And then Kurt brought up a very good point. And this is also what we do today with our big customers. So the more you have software which allows you to benchmark factories and bring them on the same level of quality, the more you can allow to have also the factories in different places. And also what I think what will happen is that the future manufacturing will be much more agile. So for instance, we bring now a rather disruptive new software-centric automation solution to the market. It's called universal automation. And it's more open. It allows you to run a PLC on different hardwares. It doesn't need to be in a dedicated hardware. You can interconnect much easier. And this allows, of course, in a production line to be much faster in changing things. And you can do this because you have the data, you have the analysis, what to do, and is it artificial intelligence or machine learning? But by bringing this software-centric and digitalization means you will be more agile to adopt also to the future needs. And that, again, would talk more to smaller factories serving specific segments, whatever, and survive like this. So similar to Kurt, I don't believe in the mega factories.
Great. Andrew, did you want to share your opinion here?
Sure. So rather than commenting the size of physical plant, I do have a prediction about the size of companies, which is that internet and AI is leading to concentration of power. We're seeing this play out in consumer internet companies where, we talk about more buzz about antitrust in the US and Europe and other places. So consumer software internet is getting to be supposedly a relatively concentrated industry. What not many people realize is that as the internet and AI get into other industries, including manufacturing, but many others as well, this will also lead to concentration of power. In fact, look at what the ride-hailing companies have done to the taxi industry, which traditionally wasn't a concentrated business, or some e-com retailers have done to retail, which traditionally wasn't concentrated. This pattern, I think, will play out in other industries as well. And the pattern is that the internet allows larger entities to collect data from all around the world, all around the country, to a central, data center headquarters. AI allows these entities to process the data, to push back out conclusions or data or decisions, high quality decisions. And this, therefore, the pendulum is swinging toward concentration of power. This is actually something that I think governments and citizens.
Yeah. So perhaps decentralized smaller factories, but all the data more centralized with larger service providers, possibly. Patrick, sorry.
And to corporate leaders, one of the worst things that could happen to you is if your industry concentrates to become a winner take most or winner take all, but you're not one of the small handful of countries or corporations. So this is why I see a lot of urgency at the corporate leadership level to figure out AI. And then if you're figuring out, start with a small proof of concept. It's okay if your first project is a $100 million project. Do a $1 million project, get that working, and then gradually ratchet up. I find that to be a more successful roadmap for company executives to figure out AI than trying to do the giant project. This is true for both countries and companies, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I would respectfully disagree with the pattern matching you're doing here, Andrew. The network externalities of social media led to a lot of the concentration that we see in consumer-facing software in particular. I think there are other trends in manufacturing that are actually different. One of them is the shortening of product cycles. So you used to make the same refrigerator for 10 years, now you don't. Mass customization. The need to be much more responsive to quality issues because consumers aren't waiting around for some consumer quality magazine issue to come out. They know immediately if a product doesn't work. These are actually all good things from the point of view of the consumers of manufactured goods, the responsiveness of manufacturers. They do pose challenges to manufacturers. And so in particular, I would say that manufacturers need to be much more flexible today, as Barbara was saying. And in order to be flexible, the vision of the lights out factory, the kind of massive infrastructure investment that goes into, say, a semiconductor fab or something like that, that's not going to apply across the board. What you're going to see instead is humans and robots working together because the humans are very flexible and they can learn a new process or they can learn a variation having to do with a customization very, very quickly. And I think this could ultimately militate to the advantage of smaller producers.
If I could maybe jump in here and my view is I fear the vision that Andrew is describing and I aspire towards what Patrick's going for. And I think the big question here is the sort of enterprise view on the data. And if you have data only within a manufacturer that is, say, highly vertically integrated, so that one company can control that data and optimally use that data in better AI, then that's going to tip the scales more towards the Andrew world where you've got the information to really dominate. Whereas if we can actually efficiently share information across the supply chain so that the benefits of that supply chain are also shared, and so we can apply AI from everybody from many small manufacturers, then we can get towards the sort of lowering costs that Patrick's working on. So I think that it really depends on how we share our information in the future, who gets that data, and so they're optimized with that data.
I feel like we've learned to build tech stacks that are massive, but also highly responsive to the individual. So I feel like collectively we've learned to do those things. We'll see how the future plays out.
Exactly.
Shai, you've been waiting patiently to share. Do you want to tell us what's on your mind?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. We are in a very unique position where we are one of the smallest. We are one of the smallest manufacturers of diamonds in the world, but we are the biggest in Europe. So we can be both we can play both the small and the big card here. And I want to ride on the wave of optimism of Kurt to say that, for example, now we are requested to mimic our 80 people factory in Botswana, and without AI and without taking all this savoir-faire that we have learned in Antwerp, to mimic such an operation in Botswana would have been simply impossible. So the way we see it is small manufacturing facility in 9 countries that are able to share information in such a way that only 5 years ago would have been so expensive. And I think the other side of it is probably the authenticity or this moment of truth that we are collecting through our data. And everybody's saying we are the best, but I think in 2030 we are really able to measure carbon in such a way, or measure impact in such a way that will not just make our facility, will enable our facility, but also will define our product in a way which we cannot find it now, and will really distinguish those who do what they say and those who just ride the wave of high quality.
Yeah, that's a great point. So AI and data availability generally is not just going to make products possibly better and cheaper. It'll actually start differentiating between different products that might look the same, but we assign different value to them because of the visibility of their provenance and things. Absolutely. which is very interesting if you think about small factories, as you were saying. AJ, did you want to share something?
I do agree with my colleagues in terms of I see a future where we're going to have decentralized manufacturing. And I hate to keep going back to 2020 and COVID, but I believe the world post-COVID is not going to be the same as before. But I see it also in a positive way, doing things that we can do to improve a lot of our processes. One thing we need to pay attention to as we move into these decentralized manufacturing facilities, it is important to understand that they're going to add a degree of complexity. So it is important to understand we have to implement the right systems, to face these challenges. So from an AI point of view, it is important to understand we cannot just have AI in silos. They can do a great job in terms of the local, capabilities, but it'll be difficult for them to detect anomalies and problems introduced by others. So it is important to introduce a holistic AI system that will allow us to basically, scale across the entire organization and introduce, companies' workflows and processes, so we can basically scale that. So decision makers across the globe can basically benefit from that. I think it is important to look at it from a holistic point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Brad, did you want to step in?
Yeah, I mean, directly sort of following on AJ's comments, if we think about patterns that work over the, say, 30 or 40 year evolution of technology in the enterprise, you could argue it's maybe 40 plus, but the patterns that work in technology more broadly all work their way back to simplicity. The more simple the product or the technology approach to deploy anywhere, whether it be a search engine, social media, or in this case, what we might believe is complicated. If the user experiences that technology as simple, that human being is more likely to use it. That's a pattern that I found to be true. And so the complexity of the AI and ML space, the intricacies of different verticals in manufacturing and industrial operations are all true. But that doesn't mean that the software that solves problems that we're discussing have to be complex. And so when your question, Claire, was about 2030 and what would this world look like that we're talking about in 2021 look like in 9 years, I believe that there will be a reference system, maybe two, of industrial intelligence, that system will connect to millions and tens of millions of machines and understand the components and the fluids and the operations of those machines and how to best maintain and operate them. That the opening move for every manufacturer or operator to connect to that system will be outrageously simple, but that ultimately the constituents in an enterprise who will benefit from that technology, that'll be the surprise. It'll be the CFO now can finally understand the operational activity and have an opinion about whether to buy or sell a machine, to change models for a better model, economic aspects of making that. And you'll also have a COO be in a much better place of understanding and control, for example, to trace, as was described before, a quality defect in the field, not just to the machine that the defect occurred on, but to the component that caused it. And now there'll be a more forensic understanding of what happened versus a process-related understanding of what happened. So all of these opportunities, at Uptake, this is what we stand for, solving all of these complicated but incredibly material opportunities simply. So the simplicity is sort of on top of massive complexity. So that's, I would say, a broader stake of constituents who care a lot about and use what we're talking about in enterprises, and a radically simple way to start so that those who start simply can then expand within an enterprise, and this can actually deliver on its promise.
Okay, so how do we get there then? Because we have 9 minutes to wrap this all up and solve the world. And I think that some of you brought up some really important points, Brad. Absolutely, we have this real potential, and it's really exciting. And whether we believe it's going to be big companies or small companies, there feels to be a buzz around AI in manufacturing. But there are also some real problems, and there's a chance that it does get to be fully saturated in manufacturing, but not in a good way, or there's a chance it doesn't really ever work out because we continue to have these small projects Andrew talked about that don't scale. Now, most of you are selling or working with clients to help them scale AI, and some of you have got to a large scale, but I think we are still very much in a world where it feels like project by project is quite tailored and hard to ramp up. So I guess I'd love to hear from you. We've heard the problems, and I don't want to kind of rehash the problems, but I'd love to hear some solutions, whether that's better data sharing, Kurt, you were talking about that, whether it's corporate responsibility, Andrew, you mentioned that. We talked about other forms of, maybe it's AI focused on certain things. Patrick, you mentioned AI and kind of cobots. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. If you had a bit of a control over this sector, what would you suggest AI companies do, regulators do? And I guess we can do a free-for-all, or I guess I see a few hands coming up. Somebody, Andrew, I think you were first.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So I think there are a lot of these small projects, but I think we need to get them to scale, because the nature of manufacturing is that you can't build one AI system to generate, like to serve 1 billion users. You just have to build one AI system for every manufacturing plant that manufactures its own different project. So what I would bet on is platforms. We sometimes call them ML ops platforms that empowers, transparent, and enables the manufacturing organization to do their own customization so they can build and efficiently deploy the AI solution that they need to create the value right there in that factory. I think that's how we make the economics work out, to enable tens of thousands of manufacturing companies to build and deploy tens of thousands of visual inspection, which one focus on, or supply chain, or other data analytics or demand prediction types of problems. I think the value there, candidly, may be even bigger than the value we're seeing in consumer software internet, if we can unlock this recipe.
Okay, great. Mohammed, do you want to share?
Yes, I think let me talk also from policy side also. For us, where we can see it is that, like AI and 3D printing is, like my colleague said, about data. So for us, we are promoting that local factories to be in Qatar to service, like I'll give you an example, aerospace businesses. So they can focus on enhancing aftermarket services, facilitating easy on-demand manufacturing of replacement parts, So this can be utilized, like AI will be communicating with the end user, will understand their needs directly rather than sitting somewhere else. So by collaborating with end user and obtaining their data directly, it will give a much better opportunities to serve them in a more better way, in a customizable way, the way that they will be looking for, and it will reduce again availability of their like parts, spare parts, or even manufacture products.
Okay, great. Patrick.
Yeah, we've been talking about AI writ large, AI as a thing that's going to transform manufacturing, and one of the difficulties I think with AI writ large is it hasn't always succeeded. So, for example, 5 or 10 years ago, there were a lot of automotive companies that were very concerned that no one was going to drive their own car anymore because autonomous cars were going to be a reality immediately. And of course, that hasn't worked out. And the issue is, when you think about manufacturing, manufacturing is about transforming inputs, very physical inputs, into value-added products at the output. And so there are particularities to every manufacturing process. And so rather than taking a sort of top-down point of view, I would suggest that one of the places for us to concentrate is being a little bit more humble and taking a bottom-up point of view and accepting manufacturing as what it is, which is very physical, and then concentrating. So, for example, certainly, as Andrew was saying, visual inspection, absolutely crucial, improves quality, reduces waste, etc. There are other domains, maintenance, as Brad was talking about, monitoring, finding places to improve processes that way. But I would be very careful about saying AI writ large is going to make the smart factory of the future, because the smart factory of the future has always been in the future. And because of the particularity of the physical world, it will stay there if we just think of it in terms of grand visions.
Okay, so a word of warning. As we close, I think I have a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 more people can comment. So Kurt, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so first of all, just want to briefly sort of double underline what Andrew was just saying about, of course, scalable data. Of course, as a company, coming from a company that sells a data platform, my marketing department requires me to say that. But that is really a critical item to get as much data in the hands of the end users as possible so that we can truly democratize analytics. And then leading off of that, also, we need to think about how we make sure that our end users can use this technology. And, that can be everything from, I'll call it the old school veterans who just, it's a new world to do data oriented operations, to younger, the next generation of plant floor operators who they are certainly familiar with technology, but may not yet be used to how you sort of ask questions and operate within a data context. And so there's still a lot of education that has to happen overall.
Definitely. Shai, did you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm aware of the time, so I'll be very short, but I can tell you that what we're doing now is we're trying to really use AI and ML as a time capsule. We have a lot of talent, which is towards the end of their careers, in their 60s or in their 70s, both physical and knowledge. And there's a phenomenal amount of knowledge here in Antwerp regarding diamond manufacturing, and we're really investing a lot of time and effort in how we can put it in a box and then use it as a part of a brain for the rest of the operation, and then how we can really not just teach the young people now, but how we can use whatever we are capturing now with AI and ML and implement it throughout every facility. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I can see, Barbara, I think you got your hand up. I'm sorry if I didn't see you earlier. Do you want to share briefly, because we have about 40 seconds left?
So I would really like to emphasize again, in the B2B business, we have the big issue that we don't share data. We are really in silos, and this is extremely dangerous. So everybody in his silo thinks my data is worth more than the other ones. And we have really many players who have their own cloud and they want to go here and there, and then they don't have enough data. And again, scalability comes with the data. And I think it's really asked for, specifically also in Europe or in the US, to push that in the B2B area, we share more data and therefore then also can make a business out of it. That's for me the biggest obstacle at the moment.
Great. That's a great point. In fact, you all made excellent points. I found this really interesting. Appreciate all of your time. I know you have lots of things you could be doing with this hour. So I'm hoping our audience really found this very interesting and insightful, and lots of food for thought as we go away and try and work on some of these problems together. So thank you all so much for your time.